The morning sun rose over Valoran Prime, casting purple light across the massive buildings of the Galactic Military Academy. This was the most famous military school in the entire Orion arm of the galaxy. Every year, hundreds of young aliens came here to learn how to become soldiers, officers, and defenders of their worlds. Today was special. The new class of cadets had arrived just 3 days ago, and they were about to begin one of the most important lessons of their training. 200 cadets sat in a large amphitheater with seats arranged in a half-circle around a central stage. The room was built to hold many different species, so some seats were filled with water for aquatic beings, while others had special supports for those with unusual body shapes. The cadets came from many worlds. The Ketheri were insect-like creatures with hard shells covering their bodies. They had large compound eyes and mandibles that clicked when they spoke or felt strong emotions. The Vallani were tall and thin, standing almost 8 feet high, with 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on their narrow faces. Their skin was pale blue, and they moved with careful grace. The Moradi came from ocean worlds. They had gills on their necks and webbed fingers, and their skin could change color based on their mood dot. And then there were the humans. Humanity had only discovered faster than light travel 30 years ago. In galactic terms, they were babies. Most species had been traveling between stars for thousands of years before humans even invented electricity. Yet somehow, these newcomers had quickly made a name for themselves. They had joined the Galactic Alliance just 15 years ago, and already they were sending cadets to the most elite military academy in known space. 5 human cadets sat together near the back of the amphitheater. Danny Ortiz was a young man from a place called Texas on Earth. He had dark hair and calm brown eyes that seemed to notice everything around him. Next to him sat Katie Monroe from Ohio, a woman with red hair tied back in a practical ponytail. She had freckles across her nose and a friendly smile that she shared with everyone she met. Chris Vega came from California. He was tall and athletic, with an easy confidence that made others want to follow him. Beth Sullivan was from Virginia, quiet and thoughtful, with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. And finally, there was Jake Howell from Montana, broad-shouldered and patient, the kind of person who thought carefully before speaking. The 5 humans had become friends quickly during their first days at the academy. They were surrounded by beings so strange and different that it felt natural to stick together. The aliens looked at them with curiosity, sometimes with confusion. Humans were still a mystery to most of the galaxy. The doors at the front of the amphitheater opened, and the room fell silent. Instructor Krelvos walked in. He was a Vallani, but unlike the young Vallani cadets, he carried the marks of a long military career. Scars crossed his pale blue skin in several places. One of his 4 eyes was clouded and damaged. He walked with a slight limp that he never explained. But despite these old wounds, he moved with complete authority. Every cadet in the room knew that this was someone who had seen real war. Krelvos reached the center stage and stood perfectly still for a long moment. His 3 good eyes moved across the room, studying each cadet in turn. When his gaze reached the human section, it lingered there for just a moment longer. "Today begins your combat psychology module," he said. His voice was deep and carried easily through the amphitheater. "You have come here to learn how to fight. But before you can learn tactics and weapons and strategy, you must first understand what war truly is. You must understand what it does to those who fight it. And you must understand the enemies and allies you may one day face." He pressed a button on the console beside him, and a holographic display flickered to life above the stage. Over the next weeks, you will study the warfare histories of each species represented in this alliance. You will see how different civilizations approach conflict. You will learn their strengths and weaknesses. and you will begin to understand why the Galactic Alliance brings so many different species together. Kralvos paused again, and something shifted in his expression. It was subtle, but the more observant cadets noticed it. For just a moment, the veteran instructor looked almost uncomfortable. "We begin with humanity," he announced. A ripple of reaction passed through the alien cadets. Whispers and clicks and bubbling sounds filled the room. The humans were so new, so unknown. Most of the aliens had never even met a human before arriving at the academy. Now they would learn about human warfare. Danny Ortiz shifted in his seat. He glanced at Katie Monroe, who raised an eyebrow. They both knew what was coming. They had grown up learning about human history, about the wars their species had fought. They knew what the aliens were about to see. The humans have provided archival footage from their historical conflicts, Kralvos continued. This material comes directly from human military archives. It is unedited. It shows real events that actually happened on Earth and in human space. The instructor's damaged eye seemed to twitch slightly. "I must advise all cadets to prepare yourselves mentally for what you are about to witness. This footage is unlike anything you have seen before. If at any point you feel unable to continue, you may leave the amphitheater. There is no shame in this. Some things are difficult to watch." Chris Vega leaned over to whisper to Beth Sullivan. "They have no idea what's coming." Beth nodded slowly. She had studied xenopsychology before joining the academy. She knew that most alien species had very different relationships with violence than humans did. The Cathari had fought territorial wars, but they were quick and decisive over in days. The Vellani preferred diplomatic solutions and only fought when absolutely necessary. The Moratti had barely any concept of large-scale warfare at all. None of them had anything like human history. Instructor Kralvos moved to the side of the stage. "We will begin with a conflict humans call World War I. This war occurred approximately 110 years ago by human time measurement. It lasted 4 years and involved most of the nations on the human homeworld." He pressed another button. "Pay close attention. What you see next will teach you more about humanity than any lecture ever could." The lights in the amphitheater dimmed. The holographic display expanded until it filled the entire front of the room. And the first images began to appear. Jake Howell took a deep breath and settled back in his seat. Around him, 200 alien cadets leaned forward with curiosity, eager to learn about their new human classmates. They had no idea that their understanding of the universe was about to change forever. The holographic display flickered, and then the images began. They were old recordings, grainy and in black and white, pulled from archives that had been preserved for over a century. The footage showed a muddy field stretching into the distance under a gray sky. Wooden poles and metal wire crisscrossed the landscape, and in long ditches carved into the earth, thousands of men waited. A whistle blew somewhere off-screen, and then the men began to climb out of the ditches and run forward across the open ground. The alien cadets watched in confusion at first. What were these humans doing? Why were they running toward the enemy positions with no cover, no protection? Then the gunfire started, and the confusion turned to horror. Men fell by the dozens, then by the hundreds. They dropped into the mud and did not get up. But the others kept running. More whistles blew. More men climbed out of the trenches. They stepped over the bodies of those who had fallen and continued forward into the wall of bullets. A Cathari cadet made a sound of distress, her mandibles clicking rapidly. "What is this?" she whispered to her neighbor. "Why do they not stop?" The footage continued. Artillery shells began to fall, tearing massive craters in the earth and throwing bodies through the air. Men who had been running one moment were simply gone the next, erased by explosions that left nothing behind. And still, More soldiers came out of the trenches. Still, they ran forward. The scene shifted. Now the footage showed the inside of the trenches themselves. Soldiers sat in the mud, their uniforms soaked and filthy. Their eyes were empty, staring at nothing. They held weapons in their hands, but they looked more like the dead than the living. The camera moved along the trench line, showing hundreds, thousands of men packed together in conditions that would have been considered torture for any prisoner. These soldiers remained in these positions for months at a time, Instructor Kralvo said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. They lived in mud. They slept in mud. They watched their friends die beside them in the mud. And when ordered, they climbed out and attacked, knowing that most of them would not survive. A Valani cadet raised a shaking hand. Instructor, surely these were prisoners. Criminals forced to fight? No, Kralvos replied. These were volunteers. Many of them signed up willingly. Others were drafted, yes, but desertion was rare. They fought because they believed in their cause. They fought for their countries, their families, their honor. The footage shifted again. Now it showed something new, something that made several alien cadets cry out in alarm. A yellow-green cloud was drifting across the battlefield toward the trenches. Soldiers began to choke and claw at their throats. They fell to the ground, their bodies twisting in agony. Poison gas, Kralvos explained. Humans developed chemical weapons to kill each other more efficiently. This particular gas destroyed the lungs. Death could take hours. A Moradi cadet suddenly stood up. His gills were flaring wildly, and his skin had turned a pale gray color that indicated extreme stress. Without a word, he rushed toward the exit and disappeared through the doors. The footage continued. 4 years of war compressed into minutes of images. Soldiers drowning in mud. Bodies hanging on wire fences. Explosions that never seemed to stop. And always, always, more men marching forward to take the place of those who had fallen. This single conflict, Kralvo said, killed approximately 17 million humans and wounded another 20 million. It lasted 4 years. And when it ended, the humans did not learn from it. 20 years later, they fought an even larger war. The display shifted to color footage now. The images were clearer, sharper, and somehow that made them worse. Tanks rolled across fields while aircraft screamed overhead. Cities burned. Civilians ran through streets filled with rubble and smoke. World War II, Kralvos announced. 60 to 70 million dead. The largest conflict in human history. Katie Monroe watched her alien classmates. Many of them had stopped looking at the display. They stared at the floor, at their hands, at anything except the images on the screen. A Kavari cadet had curled into herself, her shell closing around her body in a protective posture. 2 Valani were holding each other, their four-eyed faces twisted with distress. The footage showed soldiers storming beaches while machine gun fire cut through their ranks. It showed cities reduced to rubble, with nothing left standing for miles. It showed the aftermath of battles where bodies lay so thick that the ground could not be seen beneath them. And then it showed something else. A massive cloud, shaped like a mushroom, rising into the sky above a city. Nuclear weapons, Kralvo said quietly. The humans developed bombs capable of destroying entire cities in a single instant. They used 2 of them to end this war. The explosions killed over 100,000 people immediately. Many more died later from the effects. The amphitheater had gone completely silent. Even the sounds of breathing seemed to have stopped. The alien cadets stared at the mushroom cloud with expressions of pure disbelief. This cannot be real, a Valani cadet said. No species would do this to itself. It is real, Danny Ortiz said. He had not meant to speak, but the words came out before he could stop them. Every alien in the room turned to look at him. My great-great-grandfather fought in that war. in a place called Normandy. He survived, but most of his friends didn't. The footage shifted again. New wars in new places. Helicopters over jungles. Soldiers fighting in frozen mountains. Urban combat in cities of stone and concrete. The weapons changed, became more advanced, but the dying never stopped. A scene showed a human medic dragging a wounded soldier through a muddy field. Bullets were hitting the ground all around them, throwing up sprays of dirt. The medic was screaming, not with fear, but with determination, as he pulled his comrade towards safety. He was hit once, twice, but he kept going. He reached cover and began working on the wounded man's injuries with his own blood running down his arm. This recording is 47 years old, Krelvo said. The medic's name was recorded in human military archives. He saved 3 lives that day before bleeding to death from his own wounds. He received a medal after his death. 3 more alien cadets fled the amphitheater. The door swung shut behind them with sounds that echoed in the silence. The humans sat together, watching the footage they had all seen before in history classes, in documentaries, in the education they had received since childhood. They saw their classmates breaking around them, unable to process what they were witnessing. And they understood, perhaps for the first time, just how different they were from the rest of the galaxy. Beth Sullivan leaned close to Chris Vega. They really don't have anything like this, she whispered. Their wars are nothing compared to ours. Chris nodded slowly. No wonder they were surprised when we joined the Alliance so quickly. They probably thought we'd take centuries to catch up to them. On the screen, another battle played out. Another 1,000 soldiers fought and died for a hill, a bridge, a city block. And the remaining alien cadets watched in growing terror as they realized that this was just the beginning. Human history contains centuries more of this. Thousands of wars. Millions upon millions of dead. The lesson had only started, and already the class was falling apart. The footage continued without mercy. Instructor Krelvos had moved to the side of the stage, his 3 good eyes watching the cadets rather than the display. He had seen this footage before, during his own preparation for teaching human recruits. He knew what was coming, and he knew what effect it would have. The images shifted to more recent human conflicts. The weapons were more precise now, more advanced, but somehow that made everything worse. The footage showed soldiers clearing buildings room by room, kicking down doors, and sweeping corners with weapons raised. In one recording, a team of 6 humans fought through an entire apartment building filled with enemies. They moved like water, flowing from room to room, covering each other with perfect coordination. 2 of them died in the first minute. The other 4 kept fighting. Why did they continue? A Hethery cadet asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. Their team is broken. Their mission must be abandoned now. Standard doctrine requires withdrawal when losses reach this level. Human doctrine is different, Krelvos replied. They will explain it better than I can. He looked toward the human cadets. Jake Howell understood the unspoken request and stood slowly. When we lose people, Jake said, his voice calm and steady, we don't stop. We can't. If we stop, then the ones who died, they died for nothing. So we keep pushing. We complete the mission. We honor them by finishing what they started. A Villani cadet stared at him with all 4 eyes wide. But the statistical probability of success decreases dramatically with each loss. Logic demands retreat. We don't fight with logic, Jake replied simply. We fight with everything we have. Logic can wait until after the battle. He sat back down. The footage continued. Now, the display showed something called urban warfare. Humans fighting in destroyed cities, using broken walls and collapsed buildings as cover. Snipers waiting for hours in one position without moving, just for a single shot. Squads pinned down by enemy fire for entire days, rationing food and water and ammunition, calling for support that could not reach them. One recording showed a squad trapped in a building surrounded by enemies. They had been there for 6 hours. 3 of them were wounded. Their ammunition was running low. The audio captured their communications with their command base. "Negative on evacuation," a voice crackled through the speakers. "Enemy presence too heavy. Hold position until morning." The squad leader's response was calm. "Understood. We'll hold." "That is impossible," a Marathi cadet said. He had not fled yet, but his skin was cycling through stress colors so quickly that it looked like he was flickering. "They cannot survive another 12 hours in that position. Their commander has ordered them to die." "Watch," Instructor Krelvo said simply. The footage jumped forward in time, showing the squad still fighting as night fell. They took turns sleeping in 15-minute shifts. They shared their remaining water. When one soldier ran out of ammunition, another gave him half of what remained. And when the enemy tried to storm the building at midnight, they fought them off with knives and bare hands after their guns went empty. Morning came. Rescue helicopters arrived. 3 soldiers walked out of that building under their own power. 2 more were carried out on stretchers, but alive. Only one had died during the night, and his body was carried out too. "Humans do not leave their dead behind," Krelvos explained. "Even at great risk to the living, they will recover the bodies of the fallen. This behavior is considered irrational by most galactic military standards. To humans, it is sacred." 20 more alien cadets left the amphitheater. Some walked out quietly. Others nearly ran. One Cathari had to be helped by her classmates because her legs had stopped working from the shock. The footage shifted to one final segment. The display showed a beach, but not a peaceful one. Thousands of boats approached the shore. Thousands upon thousands of soldiers crowded on their decks, preparing to jump into the water and run toward the land. "This is Operation Overlord," Krelvos announced. "One of the largest military operations in human history." The goal was to establish a position on enemy territory. The humans knew that the landing would be heavily defended. They knew that many would die before reaching the shore. They went anyway. The boats reached the beach and the doors opened. The killing began immediately. Machine gun fire from fortified positions tore through the first soldiers before they could take a step. Bodies fell into the water, which began to turn red with blood. But the soldiers behind them kept coming. They jumped over the fallen. They used the bodies of the dead as cover. They crawled through sand mixed with blood. Casualties at some landing points exceeded 90% in the first wave, Krelvo said. But the second wave came anyway, and the third, and the fourth. They kept coming until they overwhelmed the defenses through sheer numbers and determination. A Villani cadet vomited into a waste container beside his seat. He was not the only one. The sounds of sickness filled the amphitheater. As alien after alien lost control of their bodies in response to what they were witnessing, the footage showed. Soldiers climbing cliffs while defenders above shot down at them and dropped explosives on their heads. It showed men dragging themselves forward with bullets in their legs because they could no longer walk. It showed medics working on dying soldiers while themselves under fire, refusing to seek cover until their patients were stable. By the end of that single day, Krelvo said, over 10,000 humans had been killed or wounded. The survivors pushed forward and established their position. Within a year, they had won the war. He pressed a button, and the display finally went dark. The lights in the amphitheater came back on slowly, giving the shocked cadets time to adjust. The room was much emptier than it had been at the start. Of the 200 cadets who had been present at the beginning, only 93 remained. The rest had fled at various points during the viewing. Katie Monroe looked around at the devastated faces of the aliens who had stayed. Most of them were trembling. Several were crying or making whatever sounds their species used to express grief. A few simply sat motionless, staring at nothing, their minds struggling to process what they had witnessed. The 5 humans sat unchanged. Their faces were serious, thoughtful, but not shocked. They had grown up with this history. They had learned about these wars in school, seen this footage in documentaries, heard stories from grandparents who had lived through some of these conflicts. For them, this was simply the truth of what they were. For everyone else in the room, the universe had just become a much more frightening place. Instructor Krulvos stood in the center of the stage, his scarred face revealing nothing. He waited until the shuffling and sounds of distress had faded before speaking again. "Now," he said quietly, "you begin to understand." The silence in the amphitheater was absolute. 93 cadets remained in their seats, but many of them looked like they wished they had left with the others. The Cathari survivors had pulled their shells tight around their bodies. The Villani sat perfectly still, their 4 eyes fixed on Instructor Krulvos. The Moradi were various shades of gray and pale blue, colors that indicated deep emotional trauma. And the 5 humans sat together, unchanged, waiting. Instructor Krulvos walked slowly across the stage. His limp was more noticeable now, as if the weight of what he had shown had somehow made his old wound ache again. He stopped at the center and turned to face the diminished class. "I have served the Galactic Alliance for 40 cycles," he said. His voice was quieter now, almost gentle. "I have fought in 11 major engagements. I faced the Drathkai hive swarms at the Battle of Valoran Minor, where I received these scars." He touched the damaged side of his face. "I survived the siege of Morven Station, where we held for 18 days against an enemy fleet 3 times our size." He paused, and something in his expression shifted. "I considered myself hardened to warfare. I believed I understood what combat meant, what sacrifice meant. I was wrong." The Villani instructor looked toward the human cadets. Danny, Katie, Chris, Beth, and Jake looked back at him with steady eyes. "When humanity first applied for membership in the Galactic Alliance," Krulvos continued, "our strategic analysts were tasked with evaluating their potential as military partners. They studied human history. They examined human warfare. And they reported back to the Alliance Council with findings that caused significant concern." "What kind of concern?" a Moradi cadet asked. His voice was weak, barely above a whisper. "The initial report stated that the archival footage must be fabricated," Krulvos said. "Our analysts believed it was propaganda, exaggerated material designed to intimidate potential enemies. No species, they argued, could possibly behave in the ways shown in those recordings. The levels of violence were beyond anything in our experience. The willingness to sustain casualties was impossible to explain. The entire pattern of human warfare seemed designed to be frightening rather than realistic." He turned to face Danny Ortiz directly. "Tell them," he said. Danny stood slowly. He felt every alien eye in the room fixed on him. These beings had just watched the worst moments of human history. They had seen his ancestors kill each other by the millions. And now they wanted to understand why. "It wasn't propaganda," Danny said simply. "Everything you saw was real. Every war, every battle, every death. That's our history. That's who we are." A Cathari cadet made a sound that might have been a sob. "How?" she asked. "How do you survive as a species? How do you not destroy yourselves completely?" Katie Monroe stood to join Danny. "We came close a few times," she admitted. "The nuclear weapons you saw, we built enough of them to destroy Earth many times over. For decades, 2 groups of humans pointed those weapons at each other, each ready to end everything if the other attacked first." "That is insanity," a Villani cadet said. "Maybe," Katie replied. "But we survived. We found ways to step back from the edge. We made treaties and agreements. We learned, slowly, to point our weapons outward instead of at each other. Chris Vega stood as well. You want to know how we endure it? How our soldiers function knowing what waits for them? He looked around the room at the traumatized alien faces. We train. We prepare ourselves. We build bonds with the people beside us so strong that we would rather die than let them down. And when the moment comes, we do what needs to be done. Because giving up means the people depending on us don't make it home. Beth Sullivan added, rising to join her fellow humans. That's what you don't understand about us. We're not brave because we don't feel fear. We feel it just like you do. But we fight anyway, because the alternative is worse. Jake Howell was the last to stand. The 5 humans formed a line facing the remaining cadets, presenting a united front. Your species fight when they have to, Jake said. When territory is threatened, when survival demands it. You fight from instinct or necessity. We're different. Humans fight by choice. We choose to face the danger. We choose to run toward the guns instead of away from them. And once we've made that choice, we don't stop until it's done. Instructor Krelvos nodded slowly. This is what our analysts eventually concluded, he said. After months of verification, they confirmed every engagement, every casualty figure, every act of what humans call heroism and what we initially called impossible. He pulled up a new display. It showed a timeline stretching back 10,000 years, marked with red lines indicating major human conflicts. Your species has been waging war for your entire recorded history, he said. Generation after generation, you have fought and died and fought again. You have turned warfare into something the galaxy has never witnessed before. Other species fight to win. Humans fight to win, to survive, to protect, and sometimes simply because they refuse to surrender. You have built cultures around your warriors. You tell stories about them. You honor them. You teach your children that dying for a cause is noble. The Marathi cadet who had spoken earlier raised a trembling hand. Are you saying humans enjoy war? No, Danny answered before Krelvos could speak. We hate it. Ask any veteran, any soldier who has seen real combat. They'll tell you war is hell. It's the worst thing there is. And why do you keep doing it? The Marathi asked. Danny was quiet for a moment. Because sometimes there are things worth fighting for, he said finally. Freedom, family, the people standing beside you, the ones who can't fight for themselves. When those things are threatened, we don't have a choice. We fight. And we keep fighting until the threat is gone. Instructor Krelvos deactivated the display and faced the class. The Drathkai fight from instinct, he said. Their hive mind compels them forward without individual thought or fear. The Marathi fight from territorial imperative, defending their oceans when threatened. The Cathari fight from necessity, quick surgical wars to resolve disputes. The Villani fight only when diplomacy has completely failed, and even then with great reluctance. He gestured toward the humans. Humans fight from choice. They decide to be warriors. They volunteer for the hardest duties. They run toward danger when every survival instinct tells them to flee. And when they fall, others step forward to take their place, knowing they will likely die too. The instructor's 3 good eyes swept across the remaining cadets. This is what you saw today. This is why you are afraid. And this is why the Galactic Alliance values humanity as military allies. He let the words hang in the air for a long moment. You have witnessed the truth about your new human classmates. Tomorrow, you will learn why that truth matters for the future of this alliance. Class dismissed. The cadets began to file out slowly. Most of them could not even look at the humans as they passed. The 5 humans remained standing at the front of the room, watching their alien classmates leave with expressions they were only beginning to understand. Fear, respect, and something that might have been hope. The following morning, A notice appeared on the Academy's central information system. Updated class rosters showed that 54 of the 107 cadets who had left during the viewing had officially withdrawn from the combat track. They would be transferred to other programs, diplomatic training or logistics or technical support, paths that would not require them to face what they had seen in that footage. The remaining cadets gathered in the amphitheater once more. The room felt larger now with so many empty seats. Those who had stayed sat closer together, as if seeking comfort in numbers. The atmosphere had changed completely from the previous day. Before, the aliens had looked at the humans with curiosity and mild interest. Now, that curiosity had been replaced by something deeper and more complex. Instructor Krelvos entered and walked to the center stage. He stood straighter today, his damaged eye seeming less noticeable. There was an energy about him that had not been present during the viewing. "Those of you who remain have made a choice," he began. "You have seen the truth about human warfare, and you have chosen to continue your training anyway. That choice took courage. The Alliance needs that courage." He activated the holographic display, and a map of known space appeared above the stage. Hundreds of stars glowed in different colors, marking the territories of various species. For 600 years, the Galactic Alliance has faced an enemy that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be bargained with, and cannot be stopped through conventional means. A large section of the map turned red, spreading across nearly a quarter of the displayed space. "The Drathkai Collective," Krelvos said. The name caused visible reactions among the alien cadets. Shells tightened, gills flared, skin changed color. An insectoid hive mind species driven by a single imperative: expansion. Every world they encounter either submits to their control or is exterminated. There is no middle ground. There is no negotiation. He highlighted several points on the map. For 6 centuries, the Alliance has fought the Drathkai. We have won some battles. We have held some territory. But we have never, not once, been able to push them back permanently. They simply absorb their losses and return with greater numbers. Their hive mind feels no fear, no doubt, no hesitation. They advance until they achieve their objective or are destroyed completely. The display shifted, showing casualty figures from various engagements. The numbers were staggering, millions lost over the centuries of conflict. Every species in the Alliance has contributed to this defense, Krelvos continued. Every species has sacrificed soldiers and resources. But none of us have been able to turn the tide. The best we have achieved is a slow retreat, giving ground year after year, century after century. He paused and looked toward the human cadets. And then humanity arrived. The map zoomed in on a small blue dot at the edge of Alliance space. Earth and its colony worlds. Humanity made first contact with the Drathkai 42 years ago. A colony world called New Spokane, population 800,000. The Drathkai sent a standard conquest fleet, the same force that had overwhelmed dozens of worlds before. They expected the operation to take approximately 3 weeks based on their experience with other species. Chris Vega smiled grimly. He knew this story. Every human knew this story. The siege of New Spokane lasted 3 years, Krelvos said. 3 years. The Drathkai threw wave after wave against human defenses. They used tactics that had broken every other species they had encountered. And the humans held. The display showed footage from the siege. Human soldiers in fortified positions, firing into endless swarms of insectoid attackers. Explosions lighting up the sky, bodies piling up on both sides. And through it all, the humans kept fighting. When Alliance reinforcements finally arrived, they expected to find ruins and corpses. Instead, they found human soldiers still at their posts, still fighting, still holding the line. The Drathkai had lost over 2 million warriors attempting to take that single world. A Cathari cadet spoke up, her voice filled with disbelief. 2 million? That is impossible. No defensive force could inflict such casualties. The humans did not simply defend, Krelvos replied. They counterattacked. They launched night raids into Drathkai positions. They sabotaged supply lines. They fought with a ferocity the Drathkai had never encountered. And when human reinforcements arrived with the Alliance fleet, they did not stop at driving the Drathkai away. The map showed human fleet movements pushing past New Skokan, driving deep into Drathkai territory. They followed them home, Krelvos said quietly. For the first time in 600 years, an Alliance force pushed into Drathkai space and held territory there. For the first time, the Drathkai experienced what they had inflicted on so many others. The display changed to show current strategic positions. The red area of Drathkai space had shrunk noticeably on one side, pushed back by a line of blue markers indicating human-controlled systems. The Drathkai have not entered human-claimed space since, Krelvos said. In fact, for the first time in 6 centuries, they are building defensive positions. They are fortifying their borders. They are preparing to be attacked rather than planning attacks. He turned to face the cadets directly. This is why you watched that footage yesterday. Not to traumatize you, not to frighten you, but to educate you. The humans are different from us. Their approach to warfare is unlike anything the galaxy has seen. And that difference may be the key to finally stopping the Drathkai threat. Jake Howell stood, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. We're not crazy, he said. We're not fearless or invincible. Every human soldier feels fear. We feel it just like you do, maybe even more because we know exactly what can happen on a battlefield. He looked around at the alien faces, seeing understanding beginning to dawn in some of them. But a long time ago, our ancestors decided that fear wasn't a good enough reason to stop. They decided that some things are worth dying for. And they passed that decision down through generations until it became part of who we are. Danny Ortiz stepped forward to stand beside his friend. We fight for our families, for our homes, for the people who can't fight for themselves. We fight for the soldiers standing next to us because we know they would do the same for us. That's what got us through 10,000 years of war. That's what we bring to this alliance. Beth Sullivan joined them. You saw our worst moments yesterday, the darkest parts of our history. But you also saw something else, even if you didn't realize it. You saw humans refusing to give up. You saw them carrying wounded comrades through fire. You saw them holding positions when they should have run. That's not madness. That's love. Love for each other, for what we're protecting, for what we believe in. Katie Monroe and Chris Vega completed the line of humans facing the alien cadets. 5 young soldiers from Earth, representing a species that the galaxy was only beginning to understand. Instructor Krelvos nodded slowly. Those of you who remain will train alongside these humans. You will learn their tactics, their methods, their way of thinking about combat. It will not be easy. They will push you harder than any training you have experienced. They will expect things from you that your species may have never attempted before. He straightened to his full height, his scarred face showing something that might have been pride. But if you complete this training, you will become something new. You will be warriors who understand what true determination means. You will be soldiers who can stand beside humans and match their resolve. And when the next war comes, and it will come, you will be ready. He looked across the diminished but determined faces of his students. The Galactic Alliance waited 100 years to find a species capable of standing against the Drathkai. Now that we have found them, we must learn from them. We must become more than we were. The instructor moved to the door of the amphitheater and paused. Welcome to the real academy, cadets. Your education begins now. And your first instructors will be the 5 humans you see before you." He left. The door closed behind him, and the remaining cadets turned to face the 5 young humans who stood at the front of the room. Danny Ortiz looked at his alien classmates. He saw fear in some faces, determination in others, and in a few, something that looked like hope. These beings from distant worlds had seen the worst of what humanity could do. Now they would learn the best. "All right," Danny said, rolling up his sleeves. "Let's get to work."